Alright, cool. Welcome back to another tutorial today, guys. We're going to be doing a very cool look on my model here today, but I think before entering this haircut, some things that I want to mention real quick right off the bat is that he has very cool texture. Can you notice that? It's very cool texture. Second thing that I notice is that he has hair and it's very heavy, but it's slightly lighter in the fringe. Now, that's my biggest problem area. The good thing about this haircut is that he has very good texture. So I need to create a haircut around this, and I want to go for something in between a mod and a mullet. Reason being, I want to keep some more length in the back. I want to go a little bit shorter in the front, but the sides, I do want to go a little bit tighter and almost do a low cleanup with a taper at the sideburns here. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and break down this haircut with the head shape, the hair texture, and how his face shape is gonna be formed once this haircut sets in. So with that being said, let's get into this haircut. So what I noticed about his head shape is the apex is obviously the highest point. As we get into this parietal ridge, there's a quite heavy dip. Do you notice that? Right when I put the comb in and I turn, it becomes a triangle. So it becomes quite heavy in this dip. Luckily, in the back, what I notice is that his head shape isn't too flat, but there is a quite big dip from the apex into the crown. See that? So he has quite slim corners towards these areas. So what do I know about these areas is that I need to build up a little bit of weight. I need to build a little bit of weight in order for this haircut to look structured and to look square with his face shape. Now let's take a look at his face shape real quick. Slimmer face shape. Slimmer face shape. But before we look at face shape, let's look at his hairline. What do we notice? Corners are higher, right? See, as soon as I saw him, the first thing I noticed was the front was a little bit lighter. Now we know the exact reason of why the front was lighter. The front was lighter because the corner of his hairline is higher up. What does that mean when we cut the bangs? How do we keep more weight in the corners than the middle? Okay, layering it, that's a good one. Simple as it is, we need to keep more weight in the corners than the middle, and that's it. There's no right and wrong technique right now. All we need to do as a visual artist is keep more weight in the corner than the middle in order for him to walk out today and be like, wow, this is a fire haircut. That's the one thing we need to focus on as we cut his hair. With that being said, let's jump into sectioning. So I'm gonna keep this real simple. We're gonna isolate this haircut starting off with just the apex. And the first thing that I notice is a cowlick. From that cowlick, I'm gonna drop right into behind the ear. Second section is gonna go through here. Do the same thing on the other side. Now, while you're doing this, sometimes you may notice like the hairline is jumpy or it doesn't want to section, right? If it doesn't want to go a certain direction, then try going higher or lower with the section and always move naturally to how the hair wants to lay. Okay, next section through. I'm gonna be bending the comb into the head, right? Finding the roundness of the head. So that's the first place I need to identify. The next thing I'm gonna identify is the corner of his hairline. Okay, so that's point A and that's point B. Beginning of the round to the corner of his hairline, boom, I'm gonna create a section. Same thing on this other side, beginning of the round to the corner of his hairline. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and create a section. Comb, slight bend for maximum tension, and you twist. And you get to a point where you're able, the very first section through, we're gonna get into cutting now. After I've identified the apex, the sides, and the back, I'm gonna start with the back because why? The back is the most problematic area. It's the longest part of the haircut. It's the heaviest part. So we're gonna go ahead and break down the back first and then move into everything else. First section through, straight section down the middle. I'm gonna grab that section and we need to identify our choice of length. Now, first thing I need to decide is, do I like the bottom length or not? I like it, I actually really like it. So that means we're gonna start at the top. And we need to identify how much weight it is that I want to keep in the crown. Okay, so first section through, boom. I'm gonna pick it up and I'm gonna choose my choice of length starting at the crown. Okay, now you might be wondering, how am I gonna match this into the bottom? Well, because I know I wanna leave some of this length at the bottom, I'm gonna cut this in a round layer. So I'm gonna continue cutting this in a round layer. And as I get to this bottom, because I wanna leave a lot of this length, I'm gonna pull up. Okay, that way I don't cut the bottom. I'm able to finish that off. Okay, so we have something round going into something longer. Boom. Next section through. Here's the part where we need to start thinking. We gotta create our horizontal shape as well. I'm gonna pull this up and I'm gonna go ahead and go with a round shape. So because I'm gonna go with a round shape, I'm gonna be pulling my first section into my second section, and we're gonna be cutting on base. On base, meaning the section is gonna be cut directly where the roots are at. So this section is gonna be cut exactly where this section lands. Look for my guide, there's my guide, right? Pull, there's my guide. Third guide through. Third guide through. And now this also, we're gonna be cutting on base. So we're gonna keep the section exactly where it is. There's my guide. My very last guide on this side here. We're gonna be pulling that. Boom. See how it's a lot lighter now? But the length is the same. So the weight is gone, but the length remains the same. Now here, I'm gonna go ahead and create a section down. And now we're pushing into our previous section. So I'm gonna go like this, I'm gonna go like this. I'm gonna push to check my guide. And once I see my guide, okay, which I will see here, push, boom. Boom, there's my guide, okay? And why am I choosing to cut like this rather than like this? Yo, why would I not just take it off like this? If I cut using point cutting technique, right, which this is, if I go like this and I point cut, not only is it gonna take off the weight, but it's gonna add texture, okay? The haircut is naturally gonna have texture everywhere because I've chose to point cut each layer. Let's move on to the sides. What do I know about the sides here? We know that we're gonna do a pretty low taper right here, right? We know that. But I also don't wanna go too short because I wanna keep some good length there. So here's what I'm gonna do. Here's the first section that I'm gonna grab. I notice there's too much weight sitting on the sides and I'm gonna graduate this, but I'm gonna graduate this in a way where we can still set in a low taper. The first thing I wanna do is I wanna comb everything forward and just see the movement. Once I identify the movement, I'm gonna go ahead and draw a section from this corner for the sides, okay? And we're gonna go in a diagonal line because I still wanna remove and retain weight at the same time. From here, we're gonna pick up that guide and I'm gonna elevate it as much as possible to remove that weight. Once I grab that guide, we're gonna elevate and boom, I'm gonna be able to see my guide from the back. Once I see that, Okay, I'm gonna cut in to that guide. Now, here's the part where I need to start thinking a little bit. Because I'm gonna do a low taper at the bottom, I don't wanna elevate this up because that's gonna leave too much length at the bottom. What I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna stay tight. Boom, there's my guide. And I'm just gonna remove all that weight as well. And I'm going a little bit tighter as I get to the bottom here. First guide done, next guide through. And as I get to this guide, I need to do the exact same thing that I did in my previous guide. Okay, so I need to elevate this top portion because I don't want this graduation to sit too heavy, right? I want it to sit very flowy. So I'm gonna elevate this top portion. Boom, there's my guide. And as I move down, and I'm just gonna stay tighter to the head. Next guide through. Okay, so for this top portion, elevate. Boom, cut that weight off. So this is my third section, and I'm staying tight. As I finish up this last section, you might be wondering, how many sections do I know how many to take per part of the head, right? Once you finish that off, you're gonna have great movement. Okay, you're gonna have great movement in the haircut, and you're still gonna have something very nice and tight at the bottom where you're gonna be able to clean it up. Next section through, boom, starting at this side, corner of the hairline, boom. So from that corner, you draw it to the front of the ear. From there, pick that up, and you're gonna elevate. Okay, elevate to remove that weight. There's my guide. As I get to the bottom, because I know we're gonna taper all of this out, I'm staying a little bit tighter. Okay, staying tighter. Next guide through. There's my guide. Okay, we're gonna cut. There's my guide. We're gonna cut. Now, remember, we're staying elevated here because we wanna remove the weight. And then as we get tighter, we're also staying tight to the head because we have to understand the bottom of this haircut is gonna be a low, low taper. So we don't wanna deal with too much disconnection. Last section through, boom, elevate, boom, elevate. And now what we have on this side too is beautiful movement. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split the hair down the middle first. Okay, and I'm gonna read his natural hairline. Now I'm gonna grab a section going horizontally from his natural hairline. What if I just went and drew a square hairline? What happens in the corner?
You're gonna have any weight.
Exactly. But what if I went like this and I went with his natural hairline? Now what happens? You get to see some of that hair, right? Doesn't look too empty. Does it still look empty to you or does it look pretty full? A little lighter, right? You can see that this density right here is a little lighter than the middle, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a little bit more from this corner. How does that look to you now?
Nice fuller.
It looks fuller, right? Once I've identified that, I wanna create a softer guideline with the fringe. I don't want a blunt haircut. I'm gonna grab my feather razor, and because I also want the front to sit soft, but I also want some of the weight to be removed in the front, I'm gonna choose to elevate a little bit. So we're not gonna cut it like this, because that'd be one lengthening it. I'm gonna choose to elevate it so that it could have a softer finish, but also some of this weight in the front can get removed. Okay, so we're essentially layering it just slightly. I'm gonna set in my choice of length using my feather razor and soft touches. Soft touches. And we're just setting in the foundation for the fringe. Find that disconnection and do the same thing on this side. Now what I'm gonna do And I'm gonna grab a vertical guide straight down the middle. Boom and boom. Okay, now what this is gonna allow me to do is it's gonna allow me to figure out where I disconnected the front, because we're gonna find a pretty big disconnection. See that difference in length?
Yeah.
But you notice how it's a triangle? We don't wanna start cutting this at the beginning of this triangle. Rather, you wanna start cutting this at the end of your triangle, up here. Because you wanna leave all that weight that we set in nice and heavy. End of my triangle's right there. I'm gonna start layering some of that and start removing some of that weight. And I'm gonna set in this line nice and square. Now guide 2 is gonna go into 1 because I want this to be a square from the front. I want this shape to be square from the front, so we're gonna be over directing each section back to previous. Back to previous. Now, as we get to this last guide here, I'm just gonna push everything back to previous, and I'm gonna cut whatever is left, okay? Boom. From here, same thing, back to previous. So this time, since I'm working on the other side, I'm gonna pull back to me. Pull, there's my guide. And everything on this side, I'm gonna pull back to myself. Now our foundation is set, but we have a big issue, which is dealing with a disconnection coming from this side. We're gonna leave that for now, and we're gonna work on it after. For pre-styler, I'm gonna use Mason's pomade today. And I like to use this texture paste, just grab a little bit. And I'm just gonna work this amount into the hair. Now I think it's what's crucial is you gotta understand that his hair is quite curly. So the more you add, the more it's gonna curl up and bounce. So it's all about the final touch that you kind of want with this haircut for you to decide how much pomade is actually gonna go into his hair. So I would say the key is to work little by little. We're gonna give this haircut a rough blow dry now, and I want everything to sit like 70% dry, not too dry, but also not too wet. The reason why you want to use a brush like this, when styling, you want to use a round brush because it's going to allow you to create that movement. Once you give it some rough shaping, I'm going to switch over to my styling comb. And I'm going to see what kind of haircut it is that I've created. So right now what I'm doing is I'm kind of imagining the final product. Before styling or anything, I'm just trying to see how this dry shape looks in general so that I can start really deciding how I'm gonna finish off this haircut. So what I'm gonna do now, before just jumping into everything else, is I'm actually going to start softening a little bit of this. The reason for that is because I want there to be a little bit less weight sitting in this haircut. And this is gonna give the haircut a softer silhouette. And I think it's very important before we go into styling or like finishing up the haircut that you start off with a very light haircut, because when you don't have a haircut that's light enough, what ends up happening is that the product doesn't absorb it as well. So later you're just wondering, why isn't this haircut styling the way I want it to? It's most likely 99% of the time because it's too heavy. I'm gonna add a very soft taper right here. 2 guard. 2 guard's gonna go in open. And you don't really need to really use many guards for this taper because it's gonna be so low. No guard, open just goes in. Okay, and taper is pretty much complete. that point. Don't overcomplicate this taper. It's more of a cleanup on the sideburns. Now, we're gonna get into some of this post-styling part of the haircut. But before we do so, I noticed one more issue. I kinda wanna reset the shape of this haircut. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna reset the roots a little bit. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a little bit more of this product. So a little bit more texture paste. And then I'm also going to throw a little bit of texture powder into the haircut. And I'm basically just working it in. Now, when we get to styling, I feel like it's very, very important not to rush this part of the haircut, because this is what's really gonna make or break the haircut. So I'm doing stuff, I'm trying it out, and I'm making sure I like it before just moving on to everything else. I'm gonna grab my comb. I'm gonna start laying everything out exactly how I want it to. Okay, so I'm using my comb to do this because something that's too wide teeth isn't gonna allow me to style very precisely, so. All right guys, we have our final model for our demonstration here today. I hope you guys enjoyed this creative mod slash mullet. I think what's really interesting about this haircut is we did a really good haircut that suits our model, but not only that, we did a very cool styling around it, finishing it off with some accent pieces that we'll be able to show off at the end of the haircut. But with that being said, this ends up our tutorial for this week, and I'll see you guys on the next one.